We are now approximately midway through the season at time of recording. Some teams have played 19 games, some others have played 18. And I think it's about time to do Premier League predictions for the final day of the season and how things will end up, who will be relegated, who will win the Premier League, who's going to win Champions League places, etc., etc. So I've broken it up into 5 different phases. Let's look at who will finish in the relegation places this season. So I have Sheffield United in 20th and Burnley in 19th. And I don't think that too many people will be surprised by that. Some people might have Burnley 20th and some people might have Sheffield United 20th. But I think most people would put those two in the bottom too. I think what's likely to surprise people is that Crystal Palace, in my predictions, will be relegated along with them. And to kind of justify this, I wanted to look through with you sort of the fixtures that Crystal Palace have got coming up from now until the end of the season. And they have quite a difficult fixture list. They have Brentford on Saturday. And then in January, they play Arsenal away. Then they have Sheffield United, which is a game that I think we'd expect them to win. Coming into February, they play Brighton away. They then have Chelsea at home, which will be a difficult game for them. They play Everton away, which will be a difficult game. And then Burnley, which I think we'd expect them to win. Following on from that, they have Spurs and then Luton Town, which I think will be a difficult game. They then have Newcastle and Nottingham Forest away. Nottingham Forest with Nuno Espirito Santo, I think that will be quite a difficult game for them. Into April, they have Bournemouth away. Then they play Manchester City at home. Then Liverpool away. Then West Ham at home. And then Fulham away. These are all really difficult games for them. Then they play Manchester United at home. They play Wolves away. Aston Villa at home is their final game in the season. So some really difficult fixtures for Crystal Palace. And I think that the amount of points that we could reasonably expect, which I think are fairly guaranteed from now until May, is 6. And that's really terrible for them. The fact that they have played quite a lot of much easier fixtures this season and have only amassed, I think, 18 points at this time, it's just not good enough. And for me, for the fixtures going forwards, for me, that's relegation. So let's take a look at the lower portion of the table from 12th to 17th. And one of the issues that I had with making these predictions was, like, where do I put Luton Town? Because I've made a lot of arguments over the course of this season that I don't think Luton Town will be relegated. And one of the reasons for that is because when compared to teams like Crystal Palace, for example, they actually have a much easier fixture list. I'm going to go through that. So they play Chelsea on Saturday. And then coming to January, they play Burnley away. Then they have Brighton at home. Following on from that, they have Newcastle away. I don't think anybody would expect them to win that. They have Sheffield United, who they just beat away. They play them at home. They play Manchester United at home. At Old Trafford earlier in the season, they only lost 1-0, so they could maybe get a draw off of that. They play Liverpool away, which you would expect that they'll lose. They play Aston Villa at home, and look, they were competitive against Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal and Man City this season. There's an opportunity there for them to be competitive against Aston Villa, maybe pick up a point. They play Crystal Palace away. They could reasonably win that. They play Forest at home. They could win that. They play Tottenham away. That's a difficult game for them. They play Arsenal away. That's difficult. They play Bournemouth at home. They could win that. They play Mancity away. They'd probably lose that. They play Brentford at home. That's another opportunity for them to maybe get a point. they play Wolves away, and then into May, they play Everton at home, they play West Ham away, they play Bournemouth away, and finally they play Fulham at home. So there's a few reasonable opportunities there for Luton Town to pick up points between now and May. And I think that there's a reasonable opportunity for them to pick up 9 or more points. And if they pick up 9 or more points, then against what I would say Crystal Palace are guaranteed in their 6 points, they have a reasonable opportunity to stay in the Premier League. Above them, I have Nottingham Forest. I think that the Nuno Espirito Santo appointment will save them. We have Everton above them. They have a couple of difficult fixtures coming towards the end of the season. And obviously with the 10-point deduction, that's going to drop them down in the league. But 15th would be a good sort of finish for them with that in mind. Then we have Fulham in 14th and Bournemouth in 13th. And then Brentford in 12th. I think Brentford, once Ivan Toney comes back, I don't think that they'll sell him because of where they are in the league at this point. But I think once Ivan Toney comes back, they'll be much more consistent, particularly with their goal scoring, and that will start picking them up through the league. So that's the lower segment of the league. Let's look at mid-table. I have Wolves in 11th, and then Chelsea in 10th. And I have Chelsea, again, I'm looking at the fixtures that Chelsea have got coming up. And they have some really difficult fixtures. So they have Luton Town on Saturday. Then they have Fulham at home. Fulham are an inconsistent side, but you never know what they could do. Following that, they have Liverpool away. That's a tough game. They then have Wolves at home. You know, Wolves could get something there. They then have Crystal Palace away. They have Mancity away, and then Tottenham at home. You know, they're 3 quite difficult fixtures. Then Brentford away, then Newcastle at home. That's another tough fixture. Then Arsenal away, and then Burnley. You'd expect them to beat Burnley. Then they have Manchester United at home. Then they have Sheffield United. That's an expected win for them. But then they have Everton at home and Brighton away, and then Aston Villa away. And then West Ham at home. That's a derby that you don't want towards the end of the season, particularly if you're fighting for additional places. Then they have Forest away, and finally Bournemouth at home. And Bournemouth will be a difficult game for them as well. So I think Chelsea bang in the middle of the table with their new ownership model, I think is doing them a massive disservice. And I think that's going to punish them with regards to where they finish. After that, I have Brighton in 9th and then West Ham in 8th. So that's mid-table. Let's take a look at the Europa League positions. So I have Manchester United in 7th, and I don't really feel like I have to justify that. They've not been good enough this season. They've been very inconsistent. They've had many sort of false dawns or revitalization results that have come to very little. And if they continue that form, they probably won't get 7th. In my mind, 7th would be if they started to pick up some good results on the way. In 6th, I have Newcastle. I think that where they are in the league currently, with the amount of injuries that they have, and assuming that some of those injuries will start to return and they start to pick up some really good results. And just looking at their fixture list, it's somewhat possible, although in January they have some really difficult fixtures coming up. They have Liverpool away, and then Manchester City at home, and then Aston Villa away. In February, Luton Town, you know, they'd probably win that. And then Forest at home, that's quite difficult, but I think that they could probably win that game. Bournemouth at home, Arsenal away, end of February, that's quite tough. But then sort of things start to level themselves out a bit. They have Wolves at home, and then Chelsea away, and then Crystal Palace away, and then West Ham at home, and then Everton at home, and then Fulham away. And they're starting to, you can see how they're going to start picking up points. They could go on a run of maybe 7 or 8 games of worth of a win streak. Fulham away, then Tottenham at home, and then Man United away, and then back to sort of more easier fixtures with Sheffield United at home, and then rounding out the season with Burnley away, Brighton at home, and Brentford away. So they could quite easily, towards the end of the season, they could go on a run of maybe 8 or 9 games win streak or undefeated streak, and I think that will push them into 6th, particularly if they start to get some players returning. I then have Tottenham in 5th, and I was kind of a bit disjointed as to whether to have Tottenham 4th or 5th. Ultimately, I decided on 5th, and I think that the difference for me is because the team that I've chosen to finish 4th and Tottenham, they have quite similar fixtures coming towards the end of the season, but for me it's they have those injuries in Mickey van der Ven and Maddison, who are set to come back in January. But I think that with the issues that they have with squad depth, that if they were to get one key injury on the way to the end of the season, it could drop them down into 5th. So they have Brighton on Thursday. Looking at the rest of December, on Sunday they have Bournemouth at home, and in January they have Burnley, Manchester United and Brentford, then Everton, Brighton, Wolves and Chelsea. So not necessarily difficult fixtures, although they do have some coming up. They have Crystal Palace and then Aston Villa. That's going to be difficult for them. Fulham and Luton into April. West Ham, Forest, Newcastle, Manchester City. That'll be a tough game. And then Arsenal at the end of April. Liverpool, and then finishing out the season with 2 fairly comfortable fixtures with Burnley at home and then Sheffield United away. And they're not difficult fixtures. They could go on a good run, and again, just like Newcastle, they could go on a run of 9 or 10 fixtures with undefeated. But because of their lack of squad depth, I think that they're going to struggle if they get an injury. So that's the Europa spaces. Let's take a look at the top 4. So in 4th position, I have Aston Villa. And the reason that I've chosen Aston Villa is because I was really impressed with the results that they got against Arsenal and Manchester City. And I know that they lost 3-2 to Manchester United quite recently. They didn't play particularly well in that game. And I'm going to put it down to a blip, because for the rest of the season, they've been really impressive and they've been one of the more exciting teams in the league this season. And as I said previously, they have quite a similar fixture list to Tottenham headed into May with regard to the difficult teams that they have to play and the amount of difficult teams that they're set to play. But on Saturday, they play Burnley. You would expect them to get a good result against Burnley. And I think that will sort of return them to sort of the baseline that they've achieved this season and get their confidence back up. They then have Everton away and Newcastle at home, followed by Sheffield United away and Manchester United at home. And I think that when they play Manchester United at home, they will want to make a statement with regard to that 3-2 loss. And I think that they'll want to get maybe a good 2-0, maybe even a 3-0 victory. They then play Fulham away and then Forest at home, 2 good fixtures for them. Then Luton Town away, which will be tough, but I think ultimately they'll win that game. They play Tottenham at home, which I could see them winning. They play West Ham United away, and then Wolves at home. Into April, they play Manchester City away. That'll be a tough game for them. Then Brentford at home, and then Arsenal away. That's a tough fixture. But then Bournemouth at home and Chelsea at home, they're two winnable games for them. Then Brighton away, then Liverpool at home, which they could, having beaten Arsenal and Manchester City at home, they could win that game. And then finally they play Crystal Palace away for the final game of the season. So I think that Aston Villa have a fairly good chance with regard to their fixtures, their form for the previous half of the season, of making top four. In third, I have Manchester City. I think that Manchester City, for example, if Rodri was to get a suspension, that's basically them taking a couple of games off again. They really miss Kevin De Bruyne. When he returns, I think that they'll pick up form again. But I think that ultimately it might be a bit too late for them. Defensively, they've not been as good as they have been in previous seasons, and I think that's kind of letting them down. And so I think Manchester City third next season, getting a couple of players and they'll be challenging, like seriously challenging, meaning obviously they're challenging this season, but I think that if they were to get maybe 2 or 3 signings that could make the difference, as Manchester City can, they always do this, make 2 or 3 signings, and then they'll be right up there, and maybe next season they could be a runaway team again. At Liverpool, I have second. I think that the one issue that I have with Liverpool is that their midfield is it's a brand new midfield. 2 of the players that they played, who started in midfield for them against Burnley in that 2-0 victory, joined Liverpool this season. This is their first season for Liverpool. And I think it takes a bit to get yourself set in and kind of used to playing with the players that are around you, get used to the playing style, get used to the patterns of play. And I think that next season, that Liverpool midfield could potentially be a really dominant one. And that will be the time for them to really go on and challenge. I have Arsenal winning the Premier League this season. I think of the top 3, they're the most consistent. Obviously, they are, they're top of the league. They've been top of the league most weeks this season. And I think that what they really need is a striker. There were talks of Ivan Toney in January. I don't really think that's going to happen because of where Brentford are in the league. But I'm sure that they're looking at maybe 2 or 3 potential signings. If they were to go and get one, I think it would guarantee them the league this season. But as things stand now, I have Arsenal edging it by maybe the difference between first and third could be maybe 4, maybe 5 points. Really, really close league this season. But I have Mikel Arteta fulfilling his promises to Arsenal, winning the league, and maybe even making a good, strong push in the Champions League this season. Who knows? But those are my predictions for the Premier League this season. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day.